other reports find that as schools, schools that are under-resourced are the first ones to pull the arts, and they don't have the buffer of community support and parental funding to be able to supplant that. And that in these schools that are often called dropout factories now, you've seen there have been a number of current films looking at this issue, that the kids there are actually more likely to leave school, and they're more likely to wind up on the wrong end of their lives, really. And for example, the National Association for the Association of Colored People found that there's a direct link between incarceration rates and the quality of public schools, which is not surprising. And in Los Angeles alone, 100% of the children that are being incarcerated come from 18% of all of our zip codes. That's all. That one little place. So of course it makes you think, well, what if we were to actually really focus specifically on those communities that are hardest hit, that don't have that are really falling through the cracks. The last myth that I'd like to present today has something to do with 20th century skills and 21st century skills. There's a lot of discussion about a generation gap. I don't know if any of you have felt this. How many of you are on the internet and have your email accounts and you're just really comfortable with all that? So there is a kind of it's a new space. My background, actually, my academic background, my creative background is in dance and poetry. My academic background is in urban planning. Yes. So we always used to talk about public space as the public square where you're going to meet and get together. And at one point, the public space was basically represented as a computer screen. And we thought, oh no, what will happen to us as a society, right? Actually, I've seen some fascinating things happening with making that public space of the computer, bringing it into the plaza, where you see kids plugging their computers, putting it up on a projector in the street, and playing games with each other, watching it all against the sides of buildings. And other fascinating things where we're actually bringing together this personal experience of being in front of a monitor and the public experience of being in public space. But learning is changing in a number of different ways, and one of them is really dramatically affected by technology, the use of technology. To the point where the MacArthur Foundation has said we're not going to fund anything else in the arts, in education, because education is changing so dramatically that we don't even know what to fund anymore. You know? Kids are figuring stuff out online. They're creating their own videos, they're creating their own CDs and music and recording MP3 files. There's the whole social, how many of you are on Facebook? So there's the social networks and so forth, and it's happening at such a rate that we don't even know what that means in terms of learning. And after coordinating work in partnerships with UCLA and inner city schools, I would see time and time again that out of fear of the internet, administrators, principals, school districts would shut off access to the internet at the school because they were worried that they might use it inappropriately. What we're finding is that shutting down the internet is almost like locking the front gates to a library, because that's where they're figuring things out. That's where they're doing their own personal research, etc. So it's important for us to bring in a new approach, not only to focus on education per se, but to focus on learning. How is learning happening? Where is learning happening? Learning in school and also learning outside of school. So there are pretty good policies that we have in the United States, and they're bumped up against these myths. So you can have things happen where we think it's supposed to happen this way. We understand that all children should have access to all of the arts. We know what content areas should be reached at every single grade level. And yet it still doesn't happen. And I think that what we're finding is that we have to look at the myths, but also look at the policy precedents. So quality education, and if we can do that, we can figure out what are the potential for, what is a quality ed, what do the arts have to do with really achieving the goal of everyone having access to a quality education, and what impact might that have on youth development? What might it even have on the eradication of poverty? And what impact might that have on creating relationships of peace? So just yesterday, did any of you turn in? Just yesterday we had an international gathering at the United Nations for Youth. It's been the year of the youth. And it was amazing to see the vigor of children speaking in every different language from every different country coming together and saying, what can we do together to help empower youth? One of these wonderful quotes, I think, from the United Nations is that we need to offer young people role models, inspire them with a new outlook, and their creativity will pay dividends. If we take youth seriously, give them responsibility and a place in society based on trust, and then they will excel, they can excel. But if we look at some of these issues, connecting and building bridges between communities, mobilizing and engaging youth, strengthening our networks and partnerships, increasing the awareness of children's lives. What better way to find out about what a youth, what's going on within somebody's life than to see their work that they create? I remember one time, one of the first field trips we did with one of our first partner schools, Jordan High School in Watts, when they came to UCLA. We took them around campus and we had meetings and they did a workshop at one of our museums. And one of the kids did this drawing of a cleaning lady, and they wrote, "Cleaning lady," right? And for years I thought, why would they come to campus and think cleaning lady? But it makes you think, what are their visions of what jobs are out there, or what they might become, or who they are? All of that is revealed somehow when a child puts some truth into a poem, into a short story, into a painting or drawing, into a choreography. We get to actually see into the child's perception of themselves and the world. And one of the great things about having the arts in a learning environment is that it actually makes teachers think a little bit differently about how kids learn. And that might help them actually help them teach. Another thing that I thought was interesting about the global precedent is that we can benefit from promoting understanding of inequalities with youth. That means, and that's hard stuff. It's really hard stuff. And I'm going to tell you in a moment a little bit more about how we engage with these issues at the University of California, Los Angeles. But that issue came up a lot, where a lot of the kids who were in the university and they were artists and they wanted to teach in the community were shocked to see the conditions of a lot of our public schools, because they actually didn't go to schools like that. But somehow in working together around common goals, they could see it, they could be shocked by it, but they could engage, they could work together with the schools to make a difference. And there was this sense of overcoming that was really invigorating for the participants. So in terms of a national precedent, and I love this, I really do love this, our U.S. Secretary of Education states that education in the arts is more important than ever in the global economy. Creativity is essential. Now, you can be a very creative science teacher or math teacher. Creativity isn't solely taught through the arts, but you almost can't teach the arts without creativity. You can't teach a great, authentic, quality arts class without really engaging someone's creativity. So it's one way in. There is a recent report this year out. What's that mean? So they suggest having standards-based instruction, which is basically certified teachers who've gone through school and have a credential in the arts, in arts instruction. Also arts integration, which means bringing the content areas from an art form together with the content areas from another academic content area and teaching them together. So for example, you might have science students who need to do an observation journal, but they don't know how to draw. So you could work together with the visual arts and the science to achieve the goal of teaching the content. Or you might be trying to reach health issues and deal with childhood obesity, and you can have a dance teacher working with the health teacher and teaching, or one teacher who can reach on both of those content areas. Finally, teaching artists. So teaching artists are artists who know how to teach and are prepared to teach, but they don't have a credential in teaching per se. Okay? But the idea is kind of funny, is that we need to use this national precedent, this great idea, and somehow we have to figure out how to bring it into being, which is really the challenge. In terms of a state precedent, I'm really happy to say that we now have a new movement called Arts Create California. And this is brand new. It came out of the Education Leadership Institute process with the National Endowment for the Arts, which I was really blessed to be a part of. And basically, California is expanding its educational vision, policy, and practices to promote creativity, innovation, and economic development. How are they doing this? They're starting this off by a partnership with the California Arts Council and the California Department of Education, but we're bringing in organizations from all different sectors, from industry, from higher education, superintendents and administrators, community organizations. So this is one way that we're trying to bring this bigger idea into action. Now, currently, artists come from somewhere. They come from somewhere, and they learn how to do what they're doing somehow. And currently what we call the pipeline, which is how does a child begin at point A and get to point Z? Maybe it's just knowing how to express themselves powerfully in different ways through different media. Or maybe it's actually becoming the next, Baryshnikov. We should have a structure in place so that kids can get, and adults who want to learn, can get from point A to point B. And I would say that we really don't. So where do young artists come from? I mean, you're either taught by your parents or by your community. You might be self-taught nowadays, digital media. My son taught himself how to use computer programs, and he was recording. Now he runs a little recording studio out of our garage. Completely self-taught. Went through a formal music education program, played drum in the orchestra. Taught himself how to become a composer and a music producer. Because it wasn't taught in school. Also, we have instruction through partnerships with community colleges or universities, where actually you can get a teacher from the university or the college. They can teach after school. The kids can get university credit for it. And that's actually how my daughter started her career, as she's now making films, but she began in a photography class at a community college. Or you'll have sequential instruction through the school, okay? Now, these all come from other things. They're taught by credentialed teachers, teaching artists, arts organizations, culture bears, college programs, peer groups, or the internet. Where do arts educators come from? They come from somewhere too. They're not, I can tell you, by and large, they're often not prepared in our schools of education. Sometimes they are. But oftentimes now, you can prepare yourself as a primary, secondary teacher and not have to engage in the arts at all. And then you get out into the schools, and the teachers don't feel prepared and confident to teach the arts. Well, that's a structural issue. It's a structural issue. I personally would like to see all education leaders, principals, and teachers having to engage with creativity in the arts at some point in order to become a teacher or an education leader. So arts educators are either teaching artists or credential artists, and they're kind of different processes. Maybe you get inspired by a local cultural bear or some process in your community, but then you have to go to be a credentialed teacher and you have to get state certification. Now, ironically, I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but this goes back to this idea of rigor and preparation a little bit.